Jessica Jones Season 3 is both the final season of Jessica Jones and the final season of the Netflix Marvel brand that we've grown to know and sort of love for the last 4 years, I think it has been. This time around, Jessica is up against a serial killer who believes that enhanced people have been cheating, that they haven't actually had to put in the effort and deal with the hardship that normal people have had to. Once again, this season stars Kristen Ritter, Rachel Taylor, Ika Darville, and Carrie-Ann Moss. Coming off of season 2, I was a little skeptical, but I still had hope because season 1 of this series was great. I loved the whole dynamic between Kilgrave and Jessica along with the other characters, and I feel like season 2 was kind of missing that, but also was not as focused. So going into this season, I was kind of on the fence. I didn't want to get my hopes up too high, but I also was hoping that they gave this show a proper ending. And I am actually happy to say that not only was this season better than season 2, but it gave this show a proper ending, and not only the show, but the whole Marvel Netflix era as a whole. Like previous seasons in the Marvel Netflix universe, this show is very gritty and also has a lot of twists and turns. I felt like this season, it was a little slow at first, which I'll get into later, but after a certain point, it really picks up, and I'm really invested in this whole serial killer plot, but also how some of these characters are changing or developing based on the circumstances of previous seasons and events that happened in this season. So I would say that it is definitely more entertaining and it is definitely more thrilling than season 2, but I don't think it reached the heights of season 1. So, what worked? There's actually a lot that worked for me in this season. One again being the action, very gritty, very gruesome, but also very exciting. Also, Kristen Ritter, of course, kills it as Jessica Jones. I think this is one of those superhero castings that just worked out perfectly from start to finish. I never doubted her performance. I never thought, oh no, she's not giving it as much as she could, or she's not doing as well. I think this role was made for Kristen Ritter, and I think she kills it from season 1 to now. There's also Ika Darville, who played Malcolm. His transformation from season 1 being like a crackhead to now being an investigator was an interesting arc, and I believe Ika Darville did well playing that part from the beginning and having this transformation slowly build up to where he is now. I thought that was great. As well as Carrie-Ann Moss playing Hogarth. Her performance was great. Now, I'll get into some of her story points weren't as good as previous seasons. And we also have a lot of newcomers. We have Benjamin Walker as Jessica's new buddy, Eric. We have Jeremy Bobb as the serial killer, Gregory Salinger. And we have Anish Sheth as Jessica's new snarky assistant. These three, I think, all brought something new and unique to the series that I think, again, it made it an improvement from season 2. But also, they fit well into the established cast that we already have. And I think they played off well with Kristen Ritter as well as each other, which I think also helped make this season a lot more entertaining. Another thing I liked about this season was the story. Now, there are 3, I think, main plots kind of going on at the same time, and the biggest one being the whole serial killer thing. That was probably the best part of the season, is watching Jessica go head to head with this guy who seemed to keep getting the best of her, and so she had to really find the smart way of getting this guy and taking him down the right way, not just killing him like she did with Kilgrave in season 1. She's learning more about being a hero and accepting that role and the responsibility and how that relates to her portraying herself in public, how she goes about doing what she was doing before, how she just can't do things the same way she did very early on when the show started. Now, the other 2 stories didn't work as well for me, but towards the end, I think they do have a satisfying conclusion. I will get into those later. But overall, I say the storytelling is better than it was in season 2, but not as good as it was in season 1. Lastly, I think this season had so much emotion to it, especially in the later half. Like, things happened in this season that I didn't think would hurt or like hit me as hard as they did, and yet I was sitting there like watching like, what is this? And I was so wrapped up in it, and by the end I was just on the edge of my seat like, where is this gonna go? What is about to happen? I think that was what I think really kept me going in this season and kept me watching from start to finish, is just the emotional weight, because I care about these characters. I've been with them since season 1. and Defenders. Like, they've been a part of my life for like, what, 3 years now? So in that case, I was definitely invested, and I think that was one of the stronger points of the season. So what didn't work? First, I would say the pacing could have been a little bit better. The first 3 episodes, I would say, were a little slow, and then as it went on, around episode 4, it started to pick up. I think it would have been fine if this was 8 to 10 episodes instead of the regular 13. Also, certain characters I was not a total fan of, one of those being Trish. She started off fine in season 1, but as the show kept going, she got worse, and in this season they doubled down on the stuff that we don't like about her. There are even 2 episodes centering around her, and they do add context to certain things in the story, but ultimately I did not want to see 2 full episodes about a character I didn't really like. But then her story does go in an interesting direction, especially towards the end, and I think the conclusion to that was satisfying, but getting there was tough. There's some parts that are kind of hard to watch. You just sit there like, Trish, what are you doing? But ultimately, I don't think it totally ruined the season for me, but it is something I wanted to address. Next, we have Malcolm and Hogarth. Both of the characters did have great development coming into the season. I think they were both going in interesting directions. Malcolm, we saw start from being a crackhead drug addict who was under Kilgrave's influence to then being apprentice to Jessica and then moving on and becoming his own investigator. So I thought that part was cool. I think I liked Malcolm better as the moral center and not as much as being Hogarth's lackey. I didn't like how her influence was kind of changing his character. I think he did better as the moral center, and I think it was more interesting, or I think it worked better to have that play off of Jessica, who's like, I'm going to do things my way. I don't care who I hurt. I don't care what I have to do. And then Malcolm bringing her back down to earth saying, no, we should do it this way, or we should try and help these people. I thought that worked better for his character. But I understand why they did it this way in this season. Hogarth for me was an interesting character also. I liked that even though she was helping the Defenders, helping enhance people, she did seem to have her own ulterior motives, which I thought was an interesting direction for her character. But then this season, I feel like they didn't get to play into that as much, or at least not in the first half. As we saw in the last season, she is diagnosed with MS, so her days are numbered, she's dying. And that motivation does come into play towards the beginning, but then that motivation is put into a storyline that I think was not a good fit for her necessarily. I think the second half did her story more justice. I think it was more fitting for her, the direction that they go towards the later episodes, where she is kind of playing around with loyalty, where you don't know who she's really trying to help or who she's really trying to benefit from. And so that part I thought worked well for her character, but leading up to that, I was not as sold on where the story was going. The verdict. I think Jessica Jones Season 3 is a good time. Not as good as Season 1, but definitely better than Season 2. I think that there's a lot here. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of suspense, there's a lot of good detective stuff. A lot of the stuff that I think Season 2 is missing, but also what makes Jessica Jones great. I think it's a shame that Netflix wasn't marketing this as much as they did before, but that's probably because their deal with Disney, Marvel ended, which is fair, but still, I think it's a good piece of television. I think it's a fitting ending for the Marvel and Netflix era, and I think it's a shame that not a lot of people are watching it or talking about it because it wasn't really put out there, or people think, well, it's all over, so it's not worth watching anyway. I think that's not true. I think it is still a good watch. I think it's still worth watching. Even though the Marvel Netflix era is over, I still hope that they find some way to bring these actors, these creative teams back into the MCU, because I think they were all great. It's just they weren't given the best material to work with, and I feel like they could definitely benefit from being a part of the bigger MCU world. And so I do hope that they find a way to use all these people again in the future or bring these characters back. Have you seen Jessica Jones Season 3? Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Also, let me know what you think about the Marvel Netflix era as a whole. Do you think this was a great era of television? Do you think it was just okay? Or do you think it was a total disaster? Let me know all that down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.